I'm an entrepreneur, originally from Catalonia. I immigrated to the US 20 years ago and to study for grad school. And I worked on my thesis on bacteria. I've been very interested in bacteria for a couple of decades now. And today I run a company in Boston called Vendanta Biosciences. And we are trying to make a new type of drugs that are made of live bacteria. Those are drugs that patients would take orally in a capsule. And inside the capsule are multiple different species of bacteria, what we call consortia of bacteria, which together can do things that can be, we hope, useful in medicine, including preventing infections or managing inflammation in the intestine. Those are a couple of examples. So the universe is vast because academia has done the job of pushing the frontiers to understand what are all the possible diseases that could be tied to microbiome. The challenge is that this work is a mile wide and an inch deep. And in many of these indications, we don't really know if the information is noise or actual causality, where you can say, changes in the microbiome actually drive the disease. There are, however, some indications, some diseases where the evidence that alterations in the microbiome drive the disease is very compelling, and the evidence of causality is there. We've voted with our feet in what we've chosen to do at the company in trying to attack diseases where we think the probability of success with a microbiome approach is high. In my view, the most immediate role in helping patients is in bacterial infection, in preventing bacterial infection. So today, sorry, I'm carrying a little bit of a cold. If you're an infectious disease physician, you have essentially four options to deal with controlling infections. Vaccines, we all know how they work. Antibiotics, personal protective equipment, we learned during COVID, masks, gloves, and hand hygiene. These are the things that you can do. Hopefully in the future, they have a fifth option, which is microbiome drugs that enable restoration of the microbiome in patients at high risk of acquiring enteric infections, for example. And this would be a very welcome option because the use of antibiotics, which is very necessary many times, and it's not going to go away, comes with the necessary and unfortunate collateral consequence that by using an antibiotic, you don't just kill the bacteria that you're targeting. In most cases, for broad spectrum antibiotics, you kill many other bacteria, some of which you don't want to kill. And the result of doing that is that you lose the first line of defense against some of the pathogens. It's a little bit of a paradoxical challenge that infectious disease docs have to deal with. So hopefully, with microbiome approaches, you don't have that conundrum. You can give the antibiotic when you feel the patient needs it, but then you can also restore some of the damage that follows. The emergence of new MDROs is actually a very rare event. What's far more common is that pressure on the microbiome due to the use of antibiotics creates an environment where it's much easier for these pre-existing MDROs to expand. And this is what really becomes problematic when in a hospital work can get overwhelmed, right? And so I think you get the idea. I think there's a lot of opportunities in bacterial infection in the short term. Next, I think that gastrointestinal immune disease is an area where the benefit is quite plausible. Inflammatory bowel diseases like colitis, Crohn's disease, the role of the microbiome in these conditions has been now studied for well over a couple of decades. And there's very good evidence that microbial communities can drive inflammation, and inflammation can change microbial communities. It's a sort of a vicious cycle. Other forms of extreme intestinal inflammation and damage, like graft versus host disease. In both of these conditions, there are clinical trials, sometimes randomized clinical trials, sometimes multiple randomized clinical trials in the case of colitis, that showed that changing the microbial community in the intestine can result in clinically meaningful effect in those patients. So I think that this is a set of other areas that will benefit. And then next, there's everything else, and that's probably what you see in the media, right? There's new connections to CNS, to cardiovascular disease, to cancer, just about every disease, right? And is being investigated. And I think that some of those will emerge and turn out to have merit. Many others will just be noise. There's just a lot of work to be done to figure out which is which. I think that micro interventions could be useful, for example, for cancer, but I also realize it's very early days and we're missing some very important pieces of information. Like we don't know which specific cancer patients are likely to benefit from those interventions. And so we're treating everybody, which is not a great way to go in cancer. Really knowing who you want to treat makes a big difference. And so I think as you go into this next wave of potential applications, the next layer of the onion, having a better understanding of the patient populations that are likely to benefit is going to make a big difference. Well, the short answer is that today we don't, and we cannot. That's the honest answer. The population that we're targeting in our first drug, the lead drug in C. difficile, um, uh, is interesting in that we don't really need to target the patients. Essentially, everybody benefits, and so if everybody's most people are gonna benefit, then you don't need to use a diagnosis, right? So this is, I think, applications in C. difficile. You deem that suitable for our approach, not based on a microbiome diagnostic, but based on a physician's assessment of the clinical symptoms of the patient and a laboratory diagnosis of whether they carry the pathogen. And yes, it so happens that in the C. difficile patients, if you took a fecal sample or several fecal samples and you sequence it, which we do all the time, the alterations in the microbiome are so extreme and vast that you will be able to tell they in fact have a problem. But in this specific case, you don't need to know with a sophisticated microbiome test that they have a problem because they have diarrhea 10 times a day. So the doctor can tell you, yes, they have C. difficile, right? Um, so today, I think it's okay to be skeptical about products that claim to be able to diagnose a disease or the outcomes of a disease based on a microbiome signature from stool samples or from one stool sample. The FDA, which in the US would be the ultimate arbiter of such claims, hasn't approved any diagnostic for this. However, I think in the future there is tremendous potential for these types of diagnostics because the science is advancing very fast. So just because there isn't an approved product today, it doesn't mean that there won't be one that's useful in a few years. And I think the combination of multiple data sets from sequencing your microbial communities in the intestine, understanding the metabolites that they make, the protein, the genome, combinations of these data sets, what you're eating in your diet, will be useful to help illuminate which patients are more likely to benefit from those approaches in the future. But you can tell today we're going for the low hanging fruit where you don't need the diagnostic, and hopefully in the future the diagnostics enable more subtle, nuanced approaches in specific patient populations. So I've been hiring now for a while, for almost 15 years, and to me, it's very important that the candidate is self-motivated, that they already are driven by a passion for what we're doing, the field where we're in. So if all I have to do in my job is to find the resources so that you can do what you already want to do, that's great. If the motivation isn't there to begin with, it's just so much harder to provide it. And yes, it is the job of the CEO to motivate your team too. That is part of the job description. But it's just so much easier to do this if the person is already motivated, right? Just like coaching a team, right? if you have a group of people that really, really love to play soccer, they're going to be easier to coach than a group of folks that could be doing this, but could also be doing 10 other sports and they don't really care, right? Um, it's also important because we'll go through ups and downs together as a team. And during challenging times, if your key motivations are other things, like compensation, title, yada, yada, we'll talk about this later, um, you may be the first heading out the door when things get difficult. But and we've seen big ups and downs in our microbiome field, so we've lived through that. Uh, the folks that are motivated by the work itself, they're just doing this because that is the science that they want to do, um, or by the impact that this will have in medicine. They're just more likely to stick around when and keep chipping at the problems when they find challenges in their work that brought them here in the first place, because the challenge is still there, and that's why they came, right? Related to that, I like um, people that are curious, that have a learning mindset. How do you look for this in an interview? It's hard. Both the motivation and the curiosity is not something that is immediately obvious, but you can tell, by the questions that the candidates choose to ask in an interview and how they choose to use the time that they have, the things that they choose to highlight. To me, a big red flag in interviewing um, is a candidate that doesn't have any questions, or worse, they have questions that you just know they're time fillers, that they don't really care about the answer, right? I I liken this to the process of buying a house, like a transcendent decision, the consequences of which you're going to have to live with. Um, Imagine you'll buy a house and you're spending all your savings in it. That's what getting a new job should feel like, right? Um, so if yeah, imagine you're buying a house and you don't have any questions for the owner, or you don't do an inspection, right? If you've already done the search and that's the house you want to buy, at this point, if you're doing it right, there should be some trepidation, right? You should be reasonably scared that you could make a very big mistake, um, and so you should be ready to do some investigation, even if it's asking some uncomfortable questions to the owner, right? And this should be fair game, right? Why are you selling? Why are you moving? Is there any major repair that the house is going to need? All of this is fair, and it really matters to you when you're buying the house. Same when you're buying or getting a job, right? There should be questions that are really important to your decision that you need to clarify. And it doesn't mean that because the house has a leak, you're not going to buy the house. You may still buy the house, but you're going to be that much smarter buyer, and you're less likely to regret the decision. Um, I like the candidates that when it's time to make the final interview, they're asking the really you know important questions for them. It means that they know what they're getting into. Related to what I've said before, just having an understanding or trying to get an understanding through the interview of what are the motivations of the candidate. Are they external motivations, compensation, title status? Are they internal motivations, making yourself a better professional in whatever you're doing, learning about a new space, having an impact? I think almost all of us start motivated by the former, by either the title, the compensation, and then the status to some degree. But at some point in your career, you know, you'd hope that you outgrow this phase and you graduate to having other motivations. I can give my own example. I out of school, I remember interviewing for consulting jobs with strategy consulting companies like the BCGs, McKinsey, um, which were all rejects. By the way, I got rejected by every one of them, and and there was really no good reason why I was interviewing for these companies. I mean, the best reason I can come up with is that I was looking to associate my name with their very well known brands and their prestige. So I've been through this too, right? And I think almost everybody goes through this phase, and so I have some sympathy for folks in their early careers that they care about the competition, they care about all these things. You shouldn't have to pretend that you don't when you're starting a family and you're paying a mortgage. This is fine. But at the same time, the best hires that we've ever made are people that are outgrow this phase very quick. They go through this, but quickly, early in their career, they're already motivated by the other things. And when I look back at, again, some of the best people that we've hired, I see that often. Um, and then, how do you look for that in an interview? That's hard. That's very hard. You can start looking in the resume. What does the candidate choose to highlight? Are they highlighting how many people reported to them? How many dollars were in their budget? Um, or or are they highlighting what they accomplished together with a team, what they learned? I think all of this is useful. Another trait that I like is determination. You can't get it in everybody, and it's fine to have some diversity. And so I like to ask candidates what they are looking for in their job that they don't already have in their current job. In other words, like, what's your ideal job? And I think that the specificity of the candidate's answer helps you kind of get a sense of who they are and what they really want. If they know exactly what they want, um, they're just that much more capable of acting on it. And I also say this with hesitation because by that standard, I would not have hired myself out of school. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Um, but I know it when I see it now, and it's a valuable trait. Um, I like candidates that really want the job above skills. If it comes down to a choice, have they done the homework on our company? Do they have questions on our company? Are they genuine? Um, are they totally plugged into the microbiome field? Do they understand our code? Do they understand our competitors? All of those are not just just not they're not just knowledge. They're also proxies for how much do you care about the opportunity. Um, I like optimism. At least a critical mass of people in the company having being optimists. Um, Intelligence, drive, passion for the work. So all of those things we try to look for, um, and I think they can make your search better. So in addition to everything that I just said, I think that if we're hiring an executive, um, it's like buying a bigger house, and there should be even more trepidation that you could get it wrong, right? So I like to imagine during the interview, is this a person that's going to be able to teach me about their function, where they are the experts, or do I get this feeling that I'm going to need to parachute in and meddle in their function because um, maybe they don't have everything in place? So I like folks that have great domain expertise and that have substance. Try to avoid the sort of the content free executives that look very good and can talk the talk, but when it comes to actually going deep and having the substance and doing the work, may come up shorter. And the challenge is that, you know, when you get to a certain corporate title, I would say somewhere around the VP title, um, everybody knows how to interview very well and present themselves professionally, which actually makes the interview process of finding the right fit more challenging. Um, what I'm really trying to gauge, and sometimes you need to resort to the references for this, is this a person that will be able to produce immediately when they come in and create? Um, and what I mean by that is, it can be hard to bring executives into small companies, especially if they're used to larger settings where you can be successful by optimizing and tuning the existing operations, um, and intelligence will get you a long way. In a startup, you have to create. I mean, nothing. What's the quote from Andreessen? I think I think he says nothing happens in a startup unless you make it happen, and it's just so true, right? If you have an executive that has been conditioned to like kind of wait for emails to come in, the phone to ring, wait for somebody to come to your office, somebody else to schedule the meeting. At Vedanta, they'll be waiting for a long time. Like most of our work cannot be seen like a consulting assignment where, okay, you're the area expert, and I tell you, here's exactly our problem. Can you advise on a solution? It'll be more like, hey, I don't even know what our specific problem is, that we should be worrying about it. So don't wait for me to tell you what to do. You tell me what we should do. And so we need folks that get in here and figure out what the company actually needs to do in the function that they will lead, and then do it themselves if possible. So another not great sign is, unless the function really needs it, if the person feels like they're going to need like a bunch of people doing the actual work from the get-go, it's not always the best sign. Like I prefer to know that if you have to do it yourself, you can do it, and you'll have the judgment to bring folks when, in fact, they're really necessary, and it's the best use of your time that the other folks are part of the team. So in this combination of really great domain expertise in your function, but being able to roll up the sleeves and create from scratch, is what makes an executive really outstanding operationally in a startup setting. I also like people that hold themselves accountable. So accountability. Can they describe in an interview? Can they describe their failures and their part in it? And then in the job setting, will they be able to say, yes, that's on me, and I'm going to find a way to fix this, rather than going through the cycle of denial and blaming others. Honesty. Do you feel during the interview that the person is honest? And self-aware. Like, do they know what they're getting into? How the new job could be different from their current one, especially if they come from big pharma. Do they understand how these things could be different? So all of these things I find useful, and then I also rely heavily on the opinions of other folks in the team that also look for different things in the interview process, and then we try to kind of like integrate all the information to make a better decision.